Hello, welcome to the latest edition of the OK Preps Extra Podcast. I'm Patrick Prince, joined as always by Barry Lewis. It's Monday, March 6th. And Barry, we're going to get in. The state tournament is this weekend in Oklahoma City and Norman area. We're going to get all into that here in a bit. But let's just start with, you're such a baseball fan, and like you said before we went live, you're a purist, you're a baseball purist, but maybe not quite as rigid as some. I'd really love to pick your thoughts first off on what you think of the rule changes in baseball.
Well, we've had a preview of those rule changes in the Texas League over the past year, because before they implement rules changes at the major league level, they test them out in the minor leagues. And so we've got to see a lot of those changes in the Texas League. And where do we want to start? Which rule change do you like? You want the pitch clock first?
I definitely want to start with the pitch clock. That's the one I'm completely in favor of this change, Barry. Where are you on it?
I like the pitch clock because last year I saw what it could do for the pace of play in the minor leagues. It was, along with other things that go along with the pitch clock, to move things along now, because basically baseball has been talking a good game recently about trying to improve pace of play, but nothing's really been happening to improve it. In fact, it's been getting worse. But last year in the Texas League specifically, game times were cut by about 25 minutes, the average game time. That's huge when you can cut a game time from 3 hours, 3:05 to around 2:35, 2:40. I think in a perfect world, 2:35 or 2:40 is like a great average game time. And they were able to achieve that in the Texas League last year. Because I'm not one of those. I remember when I was growing up, go to a major league game, and I saw quite a few games that are over like under 2 hours. And most of the time it's like, man, I just got here. That's a little too fast. You don't see that anymore. But then we've gone to the other extreme where games just really lag and takes way over 3 hours. So I thought last year in the Texas League, we reached a happy medium, except when in the Texas League, when you play these 7-inning doubleheader games, which I'm not crazy about. Those games seem to go by too quickly. But for the most part, you talk about 9-inning game, average 235, 240, good pace of play. I liked what I saw in the Texas League last year, and I think it's going to be a hit at the major league level because something had to be done.
Now, what about so the other side would say, Barry, that one of the great things about baseball is that it's not on a clock, is that it takes the time that it takes. There are some people who make that argument, and that nothing wrong with that argument. But what would you say to that?
I would agree for the most part, but there comes a point. I mean, you can still argue that the clock doesn't. You still got a part of that still in baseball, because you can be down by 10 runs with 2 outs in the 9th inning and you still can win the game. Whereas opposed to you're down 10 touchdowns with a minute to go in a football game, or by 15 points in a basketball game with a minute to go, you're not going to win. So that aspect still applies. As far as the pitch clock, something needs to be done to get things moving, because also limiting, which I liked, which we saw last year in the Texas League, you can only throw over to first base twice without being penalized. If you go over there a third time and you don't pick off the runner, then it's going to be a balk. So I like that too. So just things that get the game moving, because things have just gone out of hand in recent years at the major league level. There's no reason why a 3-2 game needs to be taking over 4 hours. I mean, baseball was going in a wrong direction. So I like that rule. I like the pace of play rules.
Are they trying to kind of promote stolen bases, Barry?
Yes, they are. I love getting the stolen base back into the game, because when I grew up, I've always been, this is going to sound weird to people, I've always been more of the stolen base has excited me more than home runs. I don't like the way the game is trended where it's just there's too many home runs and too many strikeouts. There's not enough action. I want more action in this, getting the stolen base a part of it again with the bigger bases and also the lack of pickoff attempts you now get. I think that's a good move, getting it in that direction. See, I'm always one of these people are going to think this is weird, probably, but I was more excited. This is like from a Cardinals standpoint, following the Cardinals. Mm-hmm. I was more excited in 1974 seeing Lou Brock chase Maury Wills' single season stolen base record than I was by watching Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa 24 years later chase Roger Maris's home run record.
Really?
Yes, very much so. So I'm much more excited by it. The weird thing was they both had such incredible similarities, the chase did, because on the calendar, both Brock and McGwire set the record on like September 10th of each year in St. Louis on a Tuesday night. So there's so many similarities, weirdly enough, in those things. Both of them were exciting. And of course, I like the Tulsa Drillers connection with Sammy Sosa, but just I had more fun watching Lou Brock in the stolen base chase than I did McGwire and Sosa in the home run chase.
Well, I love the idea, Barry, of more stolen bases. When I started watching baseball in the 80s, it was Vince Coleman, Willie McGee, Ricky Henderson, Tim Raines. You had these, base stealing was a thing then, and I miss it being a thing. So if they want to promote more base stealing, I'm with you. All in. All right, Barry, let's take a real quick break and we'll come back and we'll talk prep basketball. All right, Barry, so state tournament finally here. Let's just kind of go through the classes here and we'll just talk about the local teams. Let's start with 6A boys. Owasso plays Edmond Deer Creek at 4:30 on Thursday at the Lloyd Noble Center. Owasso kind of continued their surge and got into the state tournament. How do you like them?
I like Owasso a lot. They're certainly trending in the right direction. I think they've got a very high ceiling. The two freshmen, of course, Jalen Montanati gets most of the attention, but Bowden Williams is also a really good freshman for Owasso. Now that they've got basically a season under their belts, they're just going to get better and better. I think Owasso getting to the state tournament in the winners bracket, that's huge for them. I like their matchup against Deer Creek because Owasso has had trouble really advancing very far in the state tournament when they've qualified. So I think this is nothing is easy when you get to the state tournament, but I think a lot of years Owasso has gone into the state tournament. It seems like this is a hard matchup for them. I mean, I think this matchup is more conducive for success for Owasso than a lot of the previous ones have been. So, but still, you never know. A young team, two freshmen, how are they going to respond?
Yeah,
big spotlight, but obviously huge for them.
Can they win it?
After losing two close games to Broken Arrow earlier this year?
Right. Can they win it?
They can, but I'm going to make Edmond North the favorite to defend.
Okay. All right. How about, so you mentioned Broken Arrow a minute ago. They start off with Norman. That game is 6:00 Thursday at the Lloyd Noble Center. How do you see that one breaking down? And and specifically, Barry, I think a loss for Broken Arrow is a good thing.
It's not a bad thing now that they're in the state tournament, although I think Broken Arrow showed me a lot from what they did Saturday night, coming back from that loss to Owasso, especially in overtime. I mean, I'll make no doubt. I thought Putnam North, which is ranked number 2, here you got number 1 versus 2 matchup to just go to state. I thought Putnam, in many times in those situations, we discussed this in last week's podcast, the team that's coming to the losers bracket, especially playing the team that's just lost in overtime, has a huge edge, and especially a great team like Putnam North. So I gave Broken Arrow less than a 50% chance of winning Saturday night. But what they did was so impressive. Connor Dow, I mean, wow. He showed up big time to lead Broken Arrow. So I think winning like they did, not just winning, but winning like they did, getting the state tournament like that, I think that really bodes well for them to maybe coming away with the gold ball this week. Edmond North's the favorite, but they feel more confident about Broken Arrow's chances of winning after having gone through what they did than I did like a week ago at this time.
Sure. All right. Well, you mentioned the favorite, Edmond North. They start out with Booker T, 7:30 Thursday at the Lloyd Noble Center. I'm assuming you like Edmond North in that game.
I do, but this is I think Edmond North just is too much. But again, Booker T showed a lot last week. They had to come up with 2 wins, and they did. So not many people thought Booker T, for a second year in a row, Booker T entered the season with fairly low expectations from everybody else outside the program, and they've surprised the experts. So, but I would have to consider Edmond North the favorite.
Yeah. All right, let's drop down to 5A boys. No surprise, Memorial Chargers are in the state tournament again. They play Southeast. That game is 9:00 Wednesday. And where's that game, Barry? Is that Lloyd Noble or Fairgrounds?
Everything's at Lloyd Noble. See, that's the difference this year. Everything is at the main site this year for the first time in 5A and 6A.
Okay, what do you think of the Chargers' chances?
5A is really wide open, but Memorial made quite the statement last week against Hale, a team that they'd played two thrillers earlier this year, and we're fortunate to have won each one of those games. But that's, a lot of that is Memorial's. They know how to win those games just because of their tradition, having won so many state titles through the years. They know how to win. I think it's, but this Memorial team is not quite as deep as past Memorial teams, and that could be a factor, especially it's 3 games in 4 days this time instead of the usual 3 and 3. I think Memorial's got a good chance, but overall 5A is really wide open.
Okay. How about Holland Hall El Reno? That game is at 4:30.
Holland Hall, quite the story, both in boys and girls. Here they start the season in 4A, and they get the jolt, getting moved up to 5A in the middle of the season. But they don't let that bother them. They wind up getting the state tournament, both boys and girls anyway. So that's got to give both of those programs a lot of credit.
Yeah, I keep forgetting that, Barry. They were bumped up in the middle of the season, and both boys and girls still make state. That's pretty impressive.
It really is, especially they're not like a team that's bounced back before between 4A and 5A, a program, because there's some teams that do that. They've never been in 5A before, but they take that challenge, and they make the most of it. So a lot of credit for them, both of those teams getting to the state tournament.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about Del City Edison. That game's at 7:30.
That's pretty much a toss-up game. Edison, who I'm going to be writing about in Wednesday's paper. This is they haven't actually played a state tournament game since 2015. They've got a great basketball tradition, although they've never won a state title. They've come really close quite a few times, but they'll give it I think they've just about got as good a chance as anybody. They've split with Memorial this year. In fact, they very easily could have won both games. Memorial rallied late in the second meeting, just like we've seen Memorial do against other teams. But Edison again showed quite a lot last weekend, because they, like Broken Arrow, lost in overtime on Friday nights. So in recent years, they've lost several area consolation finals, and they were in a similar situation last year. They were pretty well spent on Friday night, coming back on Saturday. And I think that experience helped them against Grove, a Grove team, which had a full head of steam. They looked really impressive, and Grove was quite the story. They've never been to the boys state tournament. I mean, that was hard for me to believe when I heard that before going into the weekend. Like, I couldn't believe Grove has never been to the boys state tournament, and they looked like they were ready to do it. But Edison came out really strong, and they surprised me by not just beating Grove, but winning as impressively as they did after losing a heartbreaker in overtime the previous night to Holland Hall. So Edison, they've got about as good a chance as anybody. I mean, then you got, of course, Carl Albert, which you've always got a Carl Albert. When you think of 5A basketball over the past decade, you pretty well think of Memorial and Carl Albert. So it's going to be very interesting.
So Edison didn't even win a state title back in the Kevin Pritchard days?
No, they were a half second away. Kevin Pritchard hit a shot at the buzzer that would have won the game at the Mabee Center in 1986, but it was waved off, ruled too late. So that's how close they came that year.
Were you at that game?
I was at that game. That was my first year on the high school beat, actually, 1986. And they've been to the state finals 5 times, twice when I was in high school there. And but that 86 game was the closest they came. Came really close in 09 to doing it. Again, when it was at Lloyd Noble. So Edison's Coach Michael Parrish has some good vibes about going to Lloyd Noble.
So who's your 5A favorite?
I would say Memorial is the team to beat just because of what they've done and because they are ranked #1 and because they're coming in off a 30-point win last week.
And if you had to name a sleeper?
Ooh, it's hard to consider Carl Albert a sleeper, but so we won't, since they're in the upper, they're the perennial power as well. Why not Edison as the sleeper?
I was going to say that. Why? Yeah, why not?
Because the last time they reached the state title game, as I recall, I mean, they weren't the favorite to get to the state title game because most people thought that Booker T would, but they upset Booker T in the semifinals at Lloyd Noble to get to the title game.
All right, let's jump down to 3A boys where Metro plays Hugo. That game is noon on Thursday, I believe. Is that right? I think that's what that is.
I think 3A boy. Yes, 3A boys, Metro Christian.
Yeah.
Is it? Yes.
How do you see that one?
Metro Christian, I would say they're the favorite in that. I think 3A is pretty wide open. But Metro Christian would have to be the favorite. They had a little bit of a speed bump at the end of January, early February. They lost 2 games in a row, but it looks like they're back rolling again. And also locally from around here, we've got Claremore Sequoia, who's Coach Tim Bart. He's been to a lot of state tournaments previously. Mm-hmm. Bartlesville, it's his first year back as a high school head coach after 8 or 9 years away. And he's had a really fun year at Claremore Sequoia. They're 24, 25-3. And so I think they've got a good chance too to do something, although it's hard to pick against Millwood. Millwood looks, they're ranked #2. They look really tough. I mean, they're a team that's sort of under the radar because of their record, but they're 15-10, but they played a really, really tough schedule for a 3A team.
I didn't realize Tim Bart took that long a time off, almost a decade.
Yeah. Did
he just decide he wanted to get back into coaching?
Yeah, he had the itch to coach again, and he's really enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, good for him. All right, should we leave it there, or anything else you want to get into?
Want to touch on girls basketball?
Sure.
Briefly. Again, it's a really good year for the local teams in girls basketball, 6A girls. I would say Edmond North would have to be the favorite, but a very interesting first round matchup because you got a rematch of last year's title game, which Bixby lost a heartbreaker in. So you've got Edmond North and Bixby in the quarterfinals this year. And Bixby's been a really interesting team because since Meredith Mays, their outstanding inside player, suffered the knee injury early in the year, they've been a team that sometimes they look like world beaters. I mean, they've won their 3 playoff wins this year have been by an average of over 40 points, but then they lost by 25 to Norman in the area final, team that they lost to in the state tournament in 2021. So they've got possibilities. So that'll be a really intriguing game. And you also got Broken Arrow and Booker T. Both kudos to Broken Arrow and Booker T for sending both their boys and girls teams to state. So that is really an impressive feat. And then in 5A girls, of course, we talked about Holmdel, again, another school which sent both their teams. Talquah also in our all world coverage area, they're sent both their boys and girls teams. The boys, it's going to be their first state tournament game since 2009. They qualified in 2020, but lost out due to COVID. Then you've got a really interesting game. You don't see this much in the large classifications where you've got two teams from the Tulsa Metro playing each other in the first round.
Yeah.
It's Sapulpa and Glenpool. So great accomplishment for Glenpool going through the West to get to the state tournament. I think Sapulpa will be too much for them, but that's a really neat matchup. I think Sapulpa and Glenpool have a little bit of a rivalry. So, but I think Sapulpa's the team to beat in 5A girls.
We should also, too, Barry, update everybody on Inside Outside contest. We're going to unveil winners this week, right?
Yes, the first winner was unveiled today as we taped Jareth Ingram, Mr. Inside from Tulsa Memorial. And then tomorrow we will have, in Tuesday's paper, have Ms. Inside. Then Wednesday is Mr. Outside. And Thursday is Ms. Outside.
Yeah.
So I will, I think the voting was really interesting because each year, usually there are some players who are picked, like you wouldn't think that they would win the contest, that really surprise you. But this year, I think all four winners, they are among definitely the very elite players in the Tulsa area. So, but thanks to everyone who voted, and appreciate everyone's participation.
Yeah, that's always a fun contest. Glad we do that. All right, we'll leave it there for this week, Barry. We appreciate everybody checking us out. Barry and I usually record once a week, usually on Monday. You can check us out for free on Google, Apple, or Spotify. We appreciate it, and Barry we'll check in next week. Sorry, I can't talk. And we'll do our post-state tournament wrap-up.
All right. Sounds good, Patrick.
All right.